My name is Mia Torres. I'm 30 years old and I live in Austin, Texas. By day I'm a social worker, the kind of person people usually think of as patient, grounded, maybe even calm under pressure. But tonight, as I sit here in my apartment with only the hum of a desk lamp for company, my voice is trembling. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't calm. It isn't patient. It's raw, jagged, and sharp enough to cut through bone. This is a story that ripped my world apart. A story of family, betrayal, and the kind of truth you don't want to see coming until it's too late. The apartment feels smaller than usual. My desk is cluttered with half-finished notes, case files stacked like silent judges, and one object that doesn't belong among the paperwork. A chipped ceramic mug. It doesn't look like much to anyone else. Just a cheap mug, its glaze cracked down the side like a lightning scar. But for me it's the only thing I carried with me when I was 10 years old, dropped at a foster home in Houston like baggage someone forgot to claim. That mug was my anchor. And even now, when the world tilts sideways, I find my fingers tracing that chip the way some people thumb a rosary bead. It's the only thing that feels real when everything else becomes a blur. Tonight, my thumb presses the ridge of that chip so hard it hurts. I'm staring at my phone, screen dark like it's daring me to wake it up. Because I know the moment I do I'll see that message again. The message that changed everything. One text. That's all it took. Just a few words blinking against the glass to remind me that family can be a loaded word. Sometimes it means blood. Sometimes it means loyalty. And sometimes, it means the knife twisting in your back. It's strange, isn't it? How quickly trust can curdle. I used to think Carlos, my foster brother, was the one person who understood what it meant to grow up scraping by, clutching at scraps of belonging. He was funny in a reckless kind of way, always sending dumb memes, always pretending nothing got to him. But last year he didn't send me a meme. He didn't send me a joke. He sent me something that felt like a detonator. Summons. And everything that came after spiraled into betrayal so deep it nearly swallowed me whole. I keep my eyes on the mug because it's easier than admitting how hard my chest is pounding. Family's supposed to be your safe place, right? The ones who have your back when the world claws at you. At least that's what I told myself when Rosa, our mentor, our lighthouse, passed away and left behind more than just memories. Rosa wasn't just a community leader, she was a visionary. She believed kids like us, foster kids, forgotten kids, could rise if someone gave us tools instead of pity. And she did something about it. She left behind a $3 million tech grant. Her life's work, her dream to build something lasting. And she left it to me. Me, not Carlos. Not the cousins. Me. Do you know what it feels like to be chosen for the first time in your life? To have someone look at you, not your scars, not your past, but at your potential and say, you're the one. It's overwhelming. It's humbling. And it's terrifying because it paints a target on your back. I should have seen it coming. I should have known that money, legacy, even love, those things draw vultures. I breathe in, the room filled with the faint smell of dust and burnt coffee. My hands are clammy, and the silence is so thick I can hear the tick of my own heartbeat in my ears. My phone is still dark. I know what waits there. I know the storm that text set off. But in this moment I want you to feel what I felt. That shiver down your spine when everything you thought you could lean on suddenly shifts. Because when betrayal comes from a stranger, it stings. When it comes from blood, well, that's a wound that doesn't close. I'm not here to sugarcoat this for you. This story isn't polished. It isn't neat. It's messy the way real betrayal always is. People like to believe family ties are unbreakable. I'm living proof that sometimes they're the first chains to snap. Carlos didn't just try to take money from me. He tried to erase me, to paint me as a fraud, to drag Rosa's memory through the mud. And he didn't do it alone. He brought cousins. He brought a private investigator with a cheap suit and cheaper morals. He even had my foster mother's voice echoing over Zoom, cold as the day she told me I was lucky we didn't leave you on the streets. They called me unstable. They said Rosa must have been confused to leave me her legacy. They wanted to sign me out of my own story. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You'll hear it all. You'll see exactly how far they went and why I refused to break. For now, all you need to know is that this story starts in a small Austin apartment with a chipped mug, a trembling hand, and a phone that felt like it carried the weight of a loaded gun. One text, one betrayal, and the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about family. I lean back in my chair, eyes closed for a second, trying to slow the drumbeat in my chest. My voice cracks when I speak, but I don't hide it. I want you to hear it. I want you to feel it. Because maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've felt the sting of someone you trusted twisting the knife. And if you have, then you'll understand why I'm still here telling this story, even when every part of me wanted to bury it deep. If you've ever been stabbed in the back by family, stick around, this one's raw. My thumb hovers over the phone screen and finally I tap it awake. The glow slices through the dim room and there it is, the text. Plain. Ordinary. Deceptively harmless. But my stomach knots as if the words themselves carry poison. I won't read it aloud just yet. Not here. Not now. All you need to know is that it was the match that lit the fuse. And once it was lit, there was no turning back. I glance at the mug one last time, the crack catching the lamplight, glowing like a scar that refuses to fade. That mug has been with me through every storm, but this one? This storm nearly shattered me. So I'm here. And so is the story. So ask yourself, what would you do if the people you called family decided you didn't deserve the life you'd built? Would you fight? Or would you fold? I didn't have the luxury of folding. This is just the beginning. Stay with me because the deeper we go, the darker it gets. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Like and subscribe if betrayal stories hit you hard, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because by the end of this I want to know, have you fought for your worth? And did you win? The engine of my old pickup growled beneath me, louder than it needed to be, a reminder of how many years I'd pushed it past its limit. I was cruising through East Austin, the streets alive with colors that felt almost too bright for the storm brewing inside me. Murals stretched across brick walls, faces of musicians, saints, and dreamers staring out like silent witnesses. The late afternoon sun poured over the paint, making every line shimmer, but I barely noticed. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, the vinyl worn smooth under my palms. For a moment I let the music from the radio wash over me. Something easy, something familiar. It was the kind of sound that normally carried me through long drives between case visits. Then my phone chimed. Just once. Like a knife against glass. The music cut off, swallowed by silence that pressed heavy against my ears. My chest tightened before I even glanced down, as if some part of me already knew this wasn't going to be a normal text. Carlos's name lit up the screen. My thumb hesitated above it. He never texted like this. Not him. Carlos was the type to send me a late-night meme of a dancing raccoon or some dumb video captioned with, "Bull, this is you." He wasn't the type to sound formal. I tapped the screen. One line. Impersonal. Meet me at the Hive. 2 p.m. Urgent family matter. I read it once, then again. The words looked wrong next to his name. Carlos didn't do urgent. Carlos didn't do formal. And he sure as hell didn't do family meetings. My stomach twisted as I gripped the wheel harder, the leather squeaking under my hand. A horn blared behind me. I hadn't realized I'd slowed almost to a crawl. I pressed the gas, truck lurching forward, but my mind was stuck on that text. The name alone sent a chill through me. A sleek tech loft downtown, buzzing with startups and venture capitalists, not the kind of place Carlos would ever set foot in. He preferred dingy bars, garages, anywhere with a dartboard and cheap beer. The Hive was Rosa's world. She used to give talks there, connecting community kids with coders, showing them a different future. That space belonged to her memory, not to Carlos. So why was he summoning me there? The murals slipped past my window, but all I could see was Rosa's face, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the weight of her hand on my shoulder when she told me I had more to offer than I believed. She was gone, but her voice still lingered like a song you can't quite stop humming. And that voice whispered now. Don't ignore this. Still, my instincts screamed caution. My gut told me this was a setup. I could almost hear my own inner monologue unraveling. Carlos doesn't do urgent unless he's after something big. And when he's after something big, someone else always pays the price. I drove on autopilot, every sense heightened. The smell of asphalt heating under the sun crept through my cracked window. My knuckles were white on the wheel. A bead of sweat rolled down my temple even though the AC blasted. I glanced at the text again as if it might change, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something harmless. But no. They stayed sharp, stiff, a tone that wasn't Carlos but was still his number. I thought about ignoring it. I thought about throwing the phone onto the passenger seat and heading anywhere else. But then Rosa's name echoed in my chest. She had trusted me with everything, her work, her grant, her vision. I couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting wasn't just about Carlos. It was about her. And if there was even a chance her legacy was on the line, how could I stay away? I whispered under my breath as if saying it aloud might steady me. It's just a meeting. Just words. But even as I said it, I didn't believe myself. Traffic thinned as I left the mural-lined streets and merged onto a wider road. The hive loomed somewhere ahead, glass walls and sharp angles, a beacon of the city's tech dreams. My chest rose and fell too fast, every breath a struggle to slow. My phone buzzed again in my lap. Same message. Same words. No emojis. No jokes. Just that stiff, urgent call. I felt a flash of anger. If this was Carlos playing games, it wasn't funny. If it wasn't a game, then it was worse. Much worse. I turned the radio back on, trying to drown the thoughts, but the sound was hollow now. Every lyric slipped past me without meaning. My mind kept circling the same questions. Why now? Why the hive? And what exactly did Carlos mean by family matter? The words left a bitter taste. Family. That word again. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart knocking like a drum in my ribs. My truck rattled over a pothole and I jolted back into the present. The hive was close now. Too close. By the time the building came into view, sleek glass catching the sun, my unease had solidified into something heavier, almost like dread. I slowed at a red light, eyes fixed on the shimmering reflection in the distance. Whatever waited for me inside that loft wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be safe. My instincts knew it. But Rosa's memory pulled me forward like a tether I couldn't break. The light turned green. I pressed the gas. And in that moment, one thought looped in my head, clear and undeniable. Carlos doesn't do urgent unless he's after something big. And whatever this was, it was about to change everything. I was 10 years old the day my life changed, though back then I didn't have the words to explain it. All I knew was the weight of a chipped ceramic mug pressed tight against my chest as I stood on a dusty doorstep in Houston. The mug was too big for my hands, but it was the only thing I carried from the place I came from, the only object that felt like mine. The summer air was heavy, thick with the smell of cut grass and car exhaust, and my throat burned from holding back tears. The door opened and there she was, Elena Ramirez. Carlos's mom. My new foster mother. She looked me up and down like she was measuring damage on a used car she hadn't asked for. Her mouth curled, not quite a smile, not quite disgust. Her first words stuck to my ribs like thorns. You're lucky we didn't leave you on the streets. Lucky. That was what she called it. I tightened my grip on the mug until the edge dug into my palm. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that luck had something to do with it, but the way her eyes slid past me told me otherwise. To Elena, I wasn't a child. I was a burden. Carlos bounded past her, new sneakers squeaking against the tile. He didn't even look at me at first. He had a wide grin, easy confidence, the kind of kid who'd already learned how to charm the room. Elena's gaze softened when it landed on him. He tugged her sleeve, asking about dinner, and I felt myself disappear. That became the pattern. Carlos with new kicks, fresh clothes, warm pats on the back. Me in hand-me-downs, expected to earn my keep by scrubbing pots after weekend barbecues, the smell of smoke and grease clinging to my hair. I learned quickly to stay small, to take up as little space as possible. At night, I'd sit in bed and run my finger along the chipped line of the mug, reminding myself it wouldn't break completely if I held on tight. Maybe I wouldn't either. Still, life has a way of sneaking light into the cracks. For me, that light came in the form of Rosa Delgado. She was the director of the community center down the street, a place that smelled like pencil shavings and printer ink, a place buzzing with old computers and kids louder than the machines. Rosa had a presence you couldn't ignore, warm eyes, quick laugh, and hands that moved like they were always building something. She noticed me the way no one else did. Not as a charity case. Not as someone lucky to be tolerated. She looked at me and said, "Mia, you're my star." The first time she said it, I didn't believe her. But she kept saying it again and again until I started to. Rosa taught me code sitting side by side at clunky keyboards. While Elena's voice still echoed in my head, "You're lucky we didn't leave you on the streets." Rosa's voice rose above it. "Families who lifts you, not who clips your wings." Every keystroke felt like carving out a space that belonged only to me. I was good at it. Better than I'd ever been at anything. And Rosa saw that before I did. But Rosa was more than just a teacher. She had a way of planting seeds you didn't notice until they grew. One night after everyone else had left the center, she leaned closer as the screen's glow lit her face. "I've got a plan for you," she whispered, almost conspiratorial, like we shared a secret. "A plan?" I asked, confused, my fingers still hovering over the keyboard. She only smiled, tapping the chipped mug I'd set beside the monitor. Just keep coding." I didn't understand then. I only knew that when Rosa said something it carried weight. She believed in me in a way that felt dangerous because it made me hope. Back at the Ramirez house, that hope felt like a fragile ember. Elena's eyes still cut through me, reminding me where I stood in her hierarchy. Carlos strutted in new shoes while I dried dishes until my knuckles cracked. But each time I traced the chip in that mug, I remembered Rosa's words. "You're my star." That contrast carved scars I carried into adulthood. The coldness of Elena, the warmth of Rosa. Two voices, one tearing down, the other building up. And somewhere between them, a girl clutching a mug and trying to figure out who she was allowed to be. Sometimes I wonder if Rosa already knew the battles I'd face. If her plan wasn't about coding at all, but about giving me armor for the wars ahead. Wars I couldn't even imagine at 10 years old. What was that plan? I ask myself that even now. She hinted, she smiled, she called me her star. But she never said outright. Maybe she wanted me to discover it piece by piece. Or maybe she knew if she told me too soon, I wouldn't have believed her. All I know is that her words stayed. When Elena's voice told me I was nothing, Rosa's voice answered back. When Carlos's new sneakers squeaked across clean tile while I scrubbed greasy pans, Rosa's voice whispered through the static of old computers, "Keep coding." The memory lingers heavy, bittersweet. That chipped mug wasn't just a relic of rejection. It was proof of survival. Proof that even when someone tried to make me feel like nothing, I could still cling to something that said otherwise. And Rosa? She gave me more than lessons in code. She gave me a vision I couldn't yet see. A plan she carried close to her chest. A plan that one day would explode into my life with more force than I ever expected. Back then I couldn't see the storm ahead. But I could feel the sorrow, the cracks forming, the faint sense that everything I held dear could be torn from me. And even now, when I look at that mug glowing under my lamp, I can still hear Rosa's whisper. Just keep coding." And God, I wish I'd known what she meant. The moment I pushed through the glass doors of the hive, the sound echoed like a warning shot. A soft hiss, almost polite, but to me it felt like a blade slicing into silence. The late afternoon light spilled across the polished concrete floor, harsh and unforgiving, bouncing off glass walls that boxed me in. The loft smelled faintly of burnt espresso and lemon cleaner, sterile in a way that didn't fit Carlos's world. This wasn't his playground. It was Rosa's. I could almost see her standing here showing kids how to debug their first lines of code, her laugh bouncing off the walls. That memory stung because now the place had been hollowed out, stripped of warmth. The only thing alive inside was hostility. My heartbeat thudded so loud I swore it echoed through the loft. One step forward, then another. And that's when I saw them, arranged around the long table like they'd been waiting for me to walk into the trap. Carlos stood at the head, posture stiff, chin raised. Gone was the foster brother who once cracked jokes and sent me ridiculous memes at 2 a.m. His face was sharp, unreadable, as if he'd traded every smile for calculation. To his left, Sophia sat with her arms folded, her nails tapping against the table in a rhythm that matched the contempt in her glare. Diego leaned forward, elbows pressed hard against the polished wood, his jaw tight, fists curled, like he was barely restraining himself from lunging across the table. And then I saw him, the man who didn't belong. Middle-aged, wiry, cheap gray suit that sagged at the shoulders, tie knotted too tight, briefcase balanced neatly beside him. His eyes were glassy, detached, the kind of eyes that didn't see people, only targets. A private investigator. My stomach dropped. Why him? Why not a lawyer if this was really about documents, about family business? The sight of him screamed that this wasn't going to be clean. On the table between them lay a stack of papers, their crisp corners lined up with deliberate precision. The title at the top stabbed at me, Assignment of Legacy Rights. The words blurred for a second as my vision swam. I tightened my fists to steady myself. They weren't even pretending. This wasn't a conversation. This was a takeover. A flicker of movement drew my eyes upward. At the far end of the loft, a giant screen came alive. Elena's face filled the space, cold and grainy through Zoom but no less chilling. The glow of the monitor painted the room in sterile blue light, and the sight of her hit me like a blow to the chest. Her stare hadn't softened in all these years. It was the same icy look she'd given me as a 10-year-old girl on her doorstep, the same one that came with words I'll never forget. "You're lucky we didn't leave you on the streets." Even pixels couldn't blunt her disdain. She leaned closer to her webcam and her voice came through the speakers, sharp as glass. "Rosa was unstable when she named you Mia. She wasn't in her right mind. That grant was never meant for you." The sentence sliced straight through me. The room seemed to tilt and for a second I couldn't breathe. I thought of Rosa's hand on my shoulder, of her calling me her star, of the quiet way she once whispered, "I've got a plan for you." And now Elena was trying to rewrite it, to erase me with a flick of her tongue, to paint Rosa's love and faith in me as nothing but delusion. My throat tightened. My bag felt heavy against my hip and instinctively I slipped my hand inside, fingers finding the chipped mug. My thumb traced its jagged crack the same way it had 100 times before. That mug was my anchor, my proof that I could survive every fall, every careless hand that tried to break me. Holding it now was the only thing keeping me from shattering. I looked around the table again. Carlos kept his eyes trained on the documents, refusing to meet my gaze. Like he'd already decided. Like I wasn't even worth looking at. Sophia smirked, her lips curling as though my pain fed her. Diego cracked his knuckles deliberately, the sound popping through the silence like firecrackers. The private investigator sat motionless, pen poised, ready to record the kill. I wanted to shout, to demand how they could twist Rosa's gift into a weapon. To scream that this wasn't family, that Rosa's legacy wasn't theirs to steal. But the words caught in my throat, strangled by the weight pressing down on me. Because what do you say when people who should have been your family reveal they've been plotting your destruction all along? Elena's voice droned on through the speakers, cold and relentless. "You have no right to this. It was a mistake, Mia. We're here to correct it for the sake of Rosa's memory." Her words blurred into noise, drowned out by the pounding in my ears. My pulse roared like a wave crashing again and again. Betrayal wasn't just in their eyes, it was in every inch of the room. The papers on the table, the PI's pen, Elena's frozen stare. It was suffocating, undeniable. My grip on the mug tightened until my hand hurt. I closed my eyes just long enough to whisper to myself, "This isn't family, it's a hit job. And I'm the target." I forced myself to look back up at the screen, locking eyes with Elena's icy gaze even as my body trembled. Her words repeated in my head like a cruel echo. "Rosa was unstable when she named you." Oh, she wasn't. Rosa had been the only stable thing in my entire life. She had seen me when no one else would. She had chosen me when everyone else tried to discard me. And no stack of papers, no cheap-suited PI, no cold blue screen was going to erase that truth. Still, the weight of it all pressed down harder, squeezing the air from my lungs. This wasn't just about Rosa's grant anymore. This was about rewriting my story, erasing my worth, reducing me to nothing. They wanted to take everything she gave me, everything I built. And yet, beneath the fear, a sliver of clarity sharpened. Why a PI? Why not a lawyer? What were they planning that needed someone like him instead of the law? The question sank into me, colder than Elena's words, because it hinted at something darker. If they weren't here to follow the rules, then they were here to break them. The silence stretched, heavy as a stone. My hand stayed on the mug, my only tether, as I stared down the faces that had once passed as family. I thought I'd known betrayal before, but this was different. This was orchestrated, coordinated, final. And for the first time I understood the depth of the storm I just walked into. The air inside the loft was so still it felt alive, pressing against my skin, waiting for the first strike. The table between us gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but its surface was littered with papers that seemed to radiate malice. My pulse hammered in my ears, and just when I thought the silence might suffocate me, Carlos leaned forward. "Mia," he said, dragging out my name with a slow, oily drawl that sent a shiver down my spine. His elbows rested casually on the table, but his eyes glinted sharp as knives. "You wormed your way into Rosa's life. All those nights you spent coding for her, doing everything for free? That wasn't love. That was strategy. You made her believe she needed you." The words hit like a slap, leaving me breathless. I froze, gripping the chipped mug inside my bag until my fingers ached. He was rewriting everything. Every line of code I wrote for Rosa, every hour I gave without expectation, every drop of loyalty. In his mouth, my devotion twisted into exploitation. I forced my throat to open, my voice breaking but steady enough to carry across the room. I built her apps for love. I stayed up until dawn because she believed in me. He gave me purpose, Carlos. That wasn't manipulation, it was faith. His smirk spread slowly, almost tender, as if he pitied me. He tilted his head, softened his tone into something deceptively warm. You're still my sis, right? The false sweetness burned worse than his venom. For a heartbeat, it tugged at an old wound, at the tiny piece of me that had once wanted to belong to this family. But then I saw it. The calculation behind his smile, the way his gaze flicked toward Elena's frozen face on the Zoom screen, seeking approval. His warmth was a trap. Before I could answer, Sophia shot forward, her voice sharp enough to pierce the walls. She slammed her palm onto the table, rattling the papers. We're her real ments, she snapped. Rosa meant for us to carry her legacy. Not you. Her glare seared through me, her jealousy boiling over. I met her eyes, heat rising in my chest. You skipped Rosa's showcases, Sophia. You weren't there when she poured her soul into her work. You never stayed up past midnight debugging her code. You wanted the title, not the effort. Her mouth twisted, but before she could spit back, Diego cracked his knuckles, the sound popping like gunfire in the tense air. His fists flexed against the table, eyes hard and restless, feeding off the anger around him like gasoline to a fire. He didn't speak, but the weight of his silence was its own threat. The cheap suit of the private investigator shifted in my peripheral vision. He cleared his throat, his voice flat and rehearsed, as if reciting lines he'd delivered 100 times. Ms. Torres, he said, pulling a folder closer, metadata analysis shows you fabricated Rosa's digital will. Evidence points directly back to your devices. You hacked her accounts. The accusation hollowed the air around me. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Fabricated? Hack? My devotion, my love, turned into fraud on his tongue. My chest constricted as fury and disbelief collided. I slammed my palm onto the table so hard the stack of papers shifted, the sharp corners scraping against each other. Don't you dare reduce everything I did for Rosa to a scam. I didn't fake anything. Every line I wrote beside her. Every file, every update was because she trusted me. She called me her star. My voice cracked, but the echo lingered in the glass walls. Carlos leaned back slightly, his body language easing into a predator's calm, his tone dripping with feigned reason. Mia, no one's saying you didn't care, he said smoothly, spreading his hands as if to show mercy. But Rosa was vulnerable. You knew that. She needed guidance and you saw your chance. That's all we're saying. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. Vulnerable? Rosa? She had been the strongest person I'd ever known. She saw through Elena's coldness, through Carlos's smirk, through every barrier. She had seen me. And now he was painting me as the predator, the opportunist? Inside, something fractured. My heart was pounding too fast, my palms slick with sweat. They weren't just attacking me. They were desecrating Rosa's memory, turning her trust into weakness, her gift into evidence against me. The room blurred for a second, fury sharpening into a blade inside my chest. Then in the middle of their noise my phone buzzed. The sound was small but it cut through everything. The PI's flat tone, Sophia's venom, Carlos's false warmth. It was faint but it was there. A vibration against my leg, a glow I didn't dare look at too long. A message. Someone was reaching for me. I slipped my hand into my pocket, the screen lighting my palm for a fraction of a second before I killed it. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not here. But my heart lurched. A sliver of hope flickered, fragile but alive. Carlos noticed. Of course he did. His smirk returned, curling with satisfaction. Distracted Mia? Hiding something. I clenched the phone in my pocket, my other hand wrapped around the mug in my bag, its crack sharp under my thumb. 2 lifelines. One from my past, one from the unknown present. I refused to give him the satisfaction of an answer. The loft pressed in closer, glass walls reflecting the tension, the flickering glow of Elena's Zoom window hovering like a watchful eye. My pulse raced, my breath shallow, fury rising until it felt like fire in my veins. Inside my head the thought looped again and again, raw and jagged. They're turning my love for Rosa into a scam. And Carlos's smile, his slick, false warmth, stings worst of all. The papers lay scattered between us, waiting to decide my fate. But in my pocket the phone buzz still echoed, whispering a question that clawed at me, sharper than fear, louder than fury. Who's trying to reach me now? Elena's voice filled the loft again, cutting through the hum of the fluorescent lights like a serrated blade. Her face, pixelated but merciless on the giant Zoom screen, leaned closer as though she could loom right over me. The speakers hissed slightly, amplifying the brittle edge in her tone. Sign now, Mia, or we tank your career. Fraud charges, public disgrace. You'll lose your license, your clients, every ounce of credibility you've ever scraped together. Everything Rosa gave you will be gone. The words coiled around my chest like wire, each one tightening until my lungs felt too small. The polished table in front of me gleamed with its cruel reflection of the papers sprawled across it, the so-called assignment of legacy rights. They looked ready to swallow me whole. The loft smelled faintly of antiseptic cleaner and stale espresso, a sterile stage for this betrayal. My hand stayed buried in my bag, thumb pressed against the chipped mug, its cracked edge the only thing grounding me in that moment. Fraud. Disgrace. They weren't just trying to steal Rosa's grant. They were trying to erase me. And then, buzz. A vibration pulsed against my thigh, quick and quiet but deliberate. My phone. My lifeline. I shifted just enough to shield it from their prying eyes, letting the glow flash against my palm. A message, ready. Stay cool. My pulse skipped, my stomach flipping. Someone was out there watching, waiting. I swallowed hard, forcing my face to stay calm while Carlos lounged back in his chair with smug satisfaction. Sophia's nails tapped sharp little beats against the table, and Diego's foot bounced impatiently against the floor. They thought I was cornered. They thought this was checkmate. I straightened in my seat, pushing words past the knot in my throat. If you want me to sign anything, I said, voice low but firm, I demand an advisor. Someone neutral. Someone who actually knows the law. The loft erupted in derision. Sophia rolled her eyes so hard it was a wonder she didn't fall backward. An advisor? Please. You're stalling, Mia. Diego chuckled darkly, shaking his head like a wolf circling its prey. Carlos leaned forward, his smirk widening, his tone slick and patronizing. This isn't a courtroom, Mia. This is family. Stop pretending you have options. But I didn't flinch. My fingernails dug crescents into my palm under the table, a private act of defiance. Inside I whispered to myself, Rosa always promised to protect me. Always. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is how. The heavy door at the back of the loft creaked open. The sound was small, but it cracked the air like thunder. Every head snapped toward it. The door swung wider, squeaking on its hinges, letting in a shaft of light from the hallway. Footsteps followed. Measured, deliberate, echoing against the concrete floor. Not hurried, not nervous. Confident. A rhythm that commanded attention with every strike of heel on stone. Into the sterile white light stepped a woman in her mid-60s. Her silver hair was swept into a bun that didn't allow for nonsense. Her navy blazer fitted so sharply it looked like armor. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to prove a damn thing. In her hand, a sleek tablet gleamed as it caught the overhead lights, throwing a shard of brilliance across the room. I'm Mia's counsel, she declared, her voice calm but commanding, resonating like a church bell in the hollow loft. The atmosphere shifted instantly. It was like the oxygen had been replaced. Carlos's smirk faltered, sliding into something closer to panic. Sophia's tapping stopped mid-beat, her mouth slightly open. Diego leaned back in his chair, eyebrows knitting as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Even Elena's image froze on the screen for a beat, her cold expression interrupted by surprise. The woman didn't pause. She strode straight to my side, her heels clicking with each step, and set the tablet in front of me with a firm, deliberate motion. The device landed with a click that reverberated louder than any of Elena's threats. She glanced at me then, her eyes softening for the briefest moment, kind, steady and painfully familiar like Rosa's had once been. It was Ms. Evelyn Harper, Rosa's mentor. The venture capitalist who had backed her when no one else believed in her. The woman Rosa used to speak of with reverence, saying she was sharp, relentless, a guardian angel who played chess while everyone else played checkers. I had never thought she'd appear in my battle. And yet here she was. Carlos found his voice first, though it cracked around the edges. What the hell is this? Harper didn't even spare him a glance. She adjusted her blazer, her tone measured, deliberate. This is me fulfilling what Rosa entrusted me to do, protect her legacy. And that legacy, she added, her gaze sweeping the room before landing firmly on me, is Mia. My heart stuttered. Rosa. Even in death she had found a way to keep her promise. To make sure they couldn't erase me. Harper was her secret weapon. The PI shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his cheap suit wrinkling as he leaned forward to squint at the tablet. His pen hovered, unsure now, as if he sensed what might be inside. My stomach twisted in equal parts dread and hope. What had Rosa armed Harper with? Why did that tablet feel like a loaded gun pointed straight at my enemies? I realized I was holding my breath. My thumb rubbed the crack in my mug through the fabric of my bag, tracing the jagged line like it could anchor me. The silence that followed Harper's entrance wasn't empty. It hummed, alive with tension, vibrating with anticipation. Elena's voice finally pierced the quiet, brittle and shrill through the speaker. This is irrelevant. She has no standing here. None of this will hold up. But Harper only smiled, slow and deliberate, a predator's smile. On the contrary, she replied, her voice smooth as steel, I have exactly the standing I need. The tablet's screen flickered to life, its glow washing across the polished table. Papers glared white in the reflection, Carlos's face paled, Sophia's lips pressed into a tight line, and Diego shifted uncomfortably. Even Elena's frozen image seemed to dim against the tablet's shine. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know what evidence Harper carried, or what secrets Rosa had trusted her with. But I knew one thing. The balance of power had just shifted. Inside my pounding chest, a whisper surfaced through the chaos. Rosa always promised to protect me. Now I get it. The question gnawed at me, louder than my fear, sharper than my anger. What's on that tablet? The air inside the hive thickened like smoke after Harper set down her tablet. For a fraction of a second, silence wrapped around the room, tight and suffocating, each of us bracing for the next move. Then everything broke at once. Diego's fist slammed onto the polished table with such force that the glass walls seemed to shiver. The sound exploded through the loft like a gunshot, bouncing against steel beams and rattling the thin blinds that hung by the windows. Pens scattered to the floor, one rolling until it clinked against my boot. My heart lurched with the crack, but I didn't move. Diego's face flushed crimson, veins bulging at his temples. This is a damn joke. You don't deserve her legacy, Mia. Spit caught in the air with his words, hot and sharp, and the table shook again as he leaned over it like he wanted to crush me with his body. Before I could answer, Sophia sprang from her chair, the scrape of metal legs against the floor shrieking like nails on glass. This isn't fair, she shouted, her voice splitting high and jagged. Her hands shot out, sweeping across the documents stacked between us, scattering them like jagged leaves in a storm. Pages spun into the air before floating down in mocking silence. You tricked everyone. Rosa was supposed to choose us. For blood. Not you. Her voice cracked on that last word, as though saying it gave her claim some desperate weight. On the giant screen at the end of the room, Elena's voice erupted with fury, distorted by a bad connection but no less vicious. The feed glitched, her face freezing in sharp angles of rage, then catching up again in a flicker of light. Enough. Harper, you don't belong here. And Mia, don't fool yourself. You're done. Sign those papers or we will burn everything you've touched. Each syllable sizzled with static like sparks from a frayed wire. The room spun with noise, Diego pounding the table, Sophia's shrill cries, Elena's voice hissing in bursts. The PI scribbled frantically in his notebook, his pen scratching like an insect claw on paper, though the sweat running down his temple betrayed how unsettled he was. Carlos didn't join the shouting. He just leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, that smug smirk thinner now but still holding. Watching. Calculating. My ears rang with the chaos, and yet at the center of it I found stillness. Fear coiled in my stomach, metallic and bitter, but it wasn't stronger than the calm rising up through me. Rosa's voice whispered inside me, debug in a crash. In coding, when the program fails, you don't thrash, you don't scream. You steady your hands, find the error and correct it. Rosa's mantra had carried me through late nights, broken code and broken pieces of myself. And now, standing in the wreckage of this so-called family, I felt it again. I drew a breath, my chest expanding against the pressure of their fury, and let my words slice into the air like clean code. You skipped Rosa's showcase. Sophia froze mid-step, her eyes widening in shock before narrowing to slits of fury. Diego roared, slamming the table again so hard that Harper's water glass tipped and spilled, droplets scattering across the documents. Shut up, Mia. You don't deserve any of this. I met his fire with ice. My voice didn't rise. I coded her final app. I sat with Rosa when her hands shook too badly to type. I built with her for her. I stayed. You didn't. The words landed heavy, punching through their noise. For a flicker of a second, the loft went still again, tension hanging like a live wire. Sophia's chest heaved as if she'd run miles. Diego's fists curled so tightly his knuckles gleamed white. Carlos's smirk slipped further, just enough for me to see the crack in his mask. Elena's image on the screen lurched forward, her voice spitting through static, louder and more frantic. You don't belong in this family. Rosa was manipulated, poisoned by your lies. Stop clinging to what was never yours. Her words broke into fragments, warped by glitching audio, but the venom still seared. And then, buzz. The vibration jolted against my leg, stronger this time, rattling like a knock from the inside of my pocket. My pulse leapt. Slowly, carefully I slid my hand down and shielded the phone from view. Its glow illuminated my palm in ghostly blue. A message. 2 words. Open the door. My throat tightened. My eyes flicked toward the loft's glass doors just for a second, then back to the chaos raging around me. Diego still shouting, Sophia screeching about fairness, Elena's voice crackling into threats. But I barely heard them now. The chipped mug inside my bag pressed against my ribs, my thumb brushing its fracture again, grounding me. 2 anchors. One from the past, one buzzing in my hand, pulling me toward the unknown. Rosa's mantra pulsed louder in my head. Stay steady. Debug in a crash. I stood in the storm, Diego's fists, Sophia's screams, Elena's distorted fury, and I was the only one not spinning. Harper sat silently at my side, her stillness as deliberate as mine, but her eyes flicked to the door just once, almost imperceptible. The tablet's glow lit the table like a waiting fuse, the voices of my so-called family overlapping into a jagged chorus of rage. My phone buzzed again, one more time, insistent. It felt like a knock from fate itself. Anticipation surged hot under my skin, sharp enough to make me tremble. My gaze darted once more to the glass doors at the back of the loft, their frames reflecting fractured slivers of light. Inside, my thoughts steadied into a whisper, their meltdowns my moment. Rosa taught me to stay steady. The shouting swelled, filling the space with chaos. And all I could think was, who's at the door? The loft was already vibrating with tension when Carlos leaned forward, his smirk fading into something sharper, uglier. His voice came out low but brutal, the kind of tone meant to cut flesh. You were never Rosa's star. You were just her charity case. The words split me open. It was like he'd peeled back every scar, every fragile layer Rosa had helped me build, and poured salt straight in. Charity case. That phrase was burned into me since childhood. Elena had hissed it at me when I was 10, clutching my chipped mug in a Houston foster home. I thought Rosa had erased it, replaced it with star. But now Carlos dragged it back, twisting it until it crushed the one thing Rosa gave me that no one else had. Dignity. I felt the breath choke in my throat. My fingers dug into the edge of the table, trembling until I reached down for the mug in my bag. The crack under my thumb grounded me, but it wasn't enough to stop the storm inside. My thoughts spiraled, jagged and merciless. Carlos isn't just denying me, he's rewriting Rosa's love, reducing it to pity. He's stealing the truth of what she saw in me. Elena's voice sliced through the room, her Zoom feed glitching but her fury intact. And if you don't sign, Mia, we'll expose you. Every nonprofit, every foster youth program you've ever touched, they'll all hear the truth. That you're unstable. That you manipulated Rosa. We'll ruin your license. You'll be untouchable. Her words were acid, dripping straight onto the life I'd fought to build. My chest tightened, air catching halfway to my lungs. The thought of my foster clients, the teens who trusted me with their secrets, who looked at me like I was proof they could survive, being used as pawns, made me want to vomit. I saw their faces flash in my mind, faces I'd promised to protect. And now Elena wanted to turn them against me, stain them with my supposed disgrace. A chair screeched against the concrete. The PI rose, smoothing his cheap suit as though he were stepping into a courtroom. His face was expressionless, but his voice carried the cold weight of a practiced accusation. Evidence shows Ms. Torres hacked Rosa's accounts. Metadata logs. IP traces. All pointing back to her devices. He lifted a folder, shaking the papers so the edges flapped like wings. The digital will is a fraud. She stole this legacy. Fraud. Hacking. Stolen. Each word ricocheted off the glass walls until they felt embedded in my skin. My vision tunneled, narrowing to the absurd image of those papers fluttering in his hand. My pulse hammered so loud it drowned out everything else. I wanted to scream the truth, that I never hacked anything, that every line of code I wrote was with Rosa for Rosa because she trusted me. But my throat locked as if the lies themselves were strangling me. Before I could form a word, Sophia's chair scraped violently as she leaned forward. Her eyes burned as she shoved something across the table. A ledger, its spine cracked, its edges stained with years of fingerprints. She opened it with a snap and stabbed her finger at the columns of ink. Look. Every bus pass. Every backpack. Every pencil Rosa gave you. Every meal. Every scrap. You owe all of it. This wasn't love, Mia. It was debt. The sound of the pages flipping was unbearable, dry, papery flutters that cut through the loft louder than shouting. I looked down and there it was, an itemized list of my existence. Bus fare. Notebooks. Meals. Toothpaste. Each entry like a receipt proving my life had been a burden. Heat climbed my neck, humiliation and rage twisting together until my vision blurred. My entire body trembled. Was that what they saw when they looked at me? Not Rosa's star, not her mentee, not her partner in building dreams, but a ledger of scraps, a cost too high to be loved? My chest heaved, breaths shallow, desperate. My fingers curled around the mug so tightly the jagged crack pressed into my palm like a blade. I wanted to hurl the ledger back, to shred every page, to scream until the glass walls shattered. Instead I locked eyes with them. One by one. Carlos with his triumphant sneer. Sophia with her bitter righteousness. Diego glaring, fist still curled like he wanted to hit something. Maybe me. And Elena on the screen, her satisfaction barely contained behind the flicker of pixels. Inside my head, Carlos's voice replayed over and over. You were never Rosa's star. I blinked, and the room wavered through the blur of tears I refused to let fall. Rage clawed at my chest, colliding with despair, threatening to spill out of me. And then, buzz. My phone vibrated in my pocket, loud enough in my body that it felt like thunder. I slid my hand under the table, shielding it from view, and tilted it just enough to see the glow. A message. 2 words. From Harper. They're recorded. My lungs froze mid-breath. Recorded? My gaze darted to Harper's tablet, sitting quiet but alive on the table, its dark screen hiding secrets. My mind raced. Was it possible? Could every threat, every smear, every fabricated accusation already be captured? Elena's threats to ruin me, the PI's fraudulent evidence, Sophia's debt ledger. All of it preserved? The crack in my mug pressed deeper into my palm, a reminder of every time I'd survived being broken. My fury didn't die, it sharpened, focused. Carlos had torn Rosa's memory from me, reducing her love to pity. Elena had threatened to burn down my work with foster kids. The PI had turned my devotion into a crime. Sophia had turned my survival into debt. And now Harper's message whispered of something else. Of their undoing. Inside, my thoughts screamed with clarity. Carlos's words cut deeper than a knife. He didn't just betray me, he betrayed Rosa. But if Harper's right, if they're recorded, then their cruelty will be the rope they hang themselves with. The loft buzzed with their overlapping voices, venom flooding every corner. But all I could hear was my own heartbeat and Harper's 2 words flashing on my screen. They're recorded. Rage and dread swelled until it felt like my skin couldn't contain them. My jaw clenched, my teeth grinding together as the question burned hotter than anything else. How are they recorded? The loft was heavy with static, the air charged like the seconds before a storm. Their voices still rang, accusations, threats, ledgers waved like weapons. But my phone buzzed with a command that cut through all of it. Open the door. Every eye followed me as I rose. My hand trembled slightly on the glass handle, but I forced it steady. I pulled. The door swung wide and Harper's assistant wheeled in a cart. On it stood a massive screen, sleek and humming with quiet power, its glow slicing across the polished floor. The loft froze. The only sound was the faint squeak of the cart's wheels echoing against the concrete. Diego's fists unclenched mid-slam. Sophia's ledger slipped from her grip, pages fanning like fallen feathers. Carlos's smirk cracked down the middle, his lips twitching as if to protest, but no words came. Even Elena's Zoom feed stuttered into silence, her frozen image pixelating under the glow. Harper stepped forward, the click of her heels deliberate, her tablet casting its own cool light. "You wanted proof?" she said, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "Here it is." The screen flickered alive and Rosa's face filled the room. My chest tightened so suddenly I almost couldn't breathe. Her hair pulled back, eyes fierce even through fatigue, she looked directly into the camera, directly at Carlos. "If you're watching this," Rosa said, her voice carrying strength even in its softness, "then Carlos, you're already trying to rob Mia. I saw you use her code. For clout. For attention. But it wasn't yours. It was hers." The words rolled like thunder, shaking every inch of the glass-walled loft. Carlos staggered back a step, his complexion pale under the sterile lights. For once, the charm, the bravado, all of it drained away. Rosa's voice pressed on. "Mia is my heir. Not because she needed charity. Not because I felt pity. Because she earned it. Every line, every bug she fixed, every late night, we built together. And she carried me when I couldn't continue." Tears burned hot in my eyes. I remembered every coffee-fueled night, Rosa leaning over my shoulder, her laugh filling the room when the code finally worked. It was all here, vindicated by her voice, immortalized in her words. Harper tapped her tablet and the screen shifted. A grant application appeared, Carlos's name scrawled at the bottom. The signature flickered, peeled, and split into layers, exposed as a forgery. "Carlos," Harper said evenly, "you didn't just steal code. You forged Rosa's grant signature." And Rosa, anticipating this, secured her will on blockchain. The next file pulsed onto the screen, immutable, untouched by human hands. Rosa's blockchain-sealed will. My name clear and undeniable, written into permanence. Sophia gasped audibly, her ledger falling completely onto the table. Diego muttered curses under his breath, his knuckles whitening around the chair. Elena's voice broke through the speakers, static spitting around her words. "This is irrelevant. This doesn't." Harper didn't let her finish. Another tap, another reveal. "These loft cameras," she said, pointing to the blinking red lenses overhead, "recorded everything. Every threat. Every accusation. Every attempt at blackmail tonight." My stomach clenched as her finger slid again across the tablet, exposing the final strike. A non-profit audit document flared to life on the screen, line items glowing with crimson marks. "And Elena," Harper said with a smile sharp as glass, "your own records betray you. Fraud. Misused funds. Every dollar accounted for." Rosa kept receipts. The room seemed to collapse inward under the weight of it. The hum of the screen was the only sound for a moment, punctuated by the trembling rustle of loose papers on the table. I felt my pulse thunder in my veins, but for the first time tonight it wasn't fear. It was power. Rosa's justice. I reached into my bag, fingers brushing the crack in my mug, grounding me. Then I pulled out the folded check I'd carried like a blade for this moment. My hand didn't shake as I slid it across the table. The scrape of paper on wood echoed like a gunshot. $20,000, I said, voice steady, strong. "For your bus passes. For your pencils. For your scraps." My eyes pinned Sophia, then Carlos, then Elena's flickering feed. "Paid in full." The ledger between us lay exposed, suddenly pathetic, its ink meaningless. I leaned closer, lowering my voice until it was colder than the steel beams above. "Family doesn't blackmail. Rosa taught me that. So here's your choice. Sign this no-contest clause, or watch everything you've built collapse around you." Harper's assistant laid fresh papers across the table, the no-contest clause shining under the overhead lights. Sophia's hand trembled as she picked up the pen, her face pale. Diego's jaw clenched, but when Carlos finally lowered his head, shoulders heavy with defeat, Diego followed. Elena shrieked through static, but the glitching screen drowned her out. One by one their signatures scratched across the page. The sound, pen on paper, was surrender, final and absolute. Inside me something cracked open. Relief, triumph, grief, all tangled. Every insult, every accusation, every ledger entry, every threat. It had all built to this moment. I tightened my grip on the mug under the table, the fracture cutting into my palm. I wasn't broken. I had never been broken. The screen's glow washed over the table as the last pen fell. Rosa's video stilled in the background, her voice echoing in memory. Mia is my heir. Inside, my thoughts whispered, steady, unwavering. Every line I coded for Rosa led to this moment. I looked at them, defeated, hollow, stripped of their weapons. My chest rose with triumph, fierce and unstoppable. Rosa's legacy was safe. Rosa's legacy was mine. And for the first time I believed I had truly earned it. Austin has always thrived on whispers. It doesn't take long for stories to travel from coffee shops on East 6th to tech meetups in South Congress. And in the weeks that followed the showdown at the Hive, the names on everyone's lips weren't founders or politicians. They were Elena, Sivia, my so-called family dismantling in public view. Elena's downfall hit hardest and fastest. Her nonprofit, once a glossy machine of charity galas and photo ops, collapsed under the weight of the audit Harper brought to light. Rumors turned into headlines. Embezzled funds, thousands siphoned into consulting fees that never existed, trips disguised as outreach, even personal credit cards buried in the budgets. Donors fled overnight. Board members resigned. The polished image she had cultivated for decades shattered like glass, leaving behind nothing but fragments of betrayal. I had once believed her icy stare on Zoom meant untouchable power. Now that power was ash, scattered by the wind of truth. Diego tried to stand taller, but arrogance doesn't shield you from lawsuits. His startup, the one he paraded as proof of his genius, quickly became the target of intellectual property theft claims. Investors discovered that the shiny apps he pitched contained Rosa's fingerprints, lines of code we had written together. My code. Rosa's code. Word spread fast through Austin's tech community, and once the lawsuits landed, Diego's swagger turned into silence. His name, once printed on pitch decks, became a warning whispered over coffee. Don't trust him. Sophia's fall was quieter, but maybe the most brutal. She had shouted the loudest about fairness, about being the real mentee. But now, no company wanted her, no resume could cover the stain. She drifted from one temp job to the next. A friend mentioned spotting her folding clothes in a department store, her face drawn, her voice sharp when customers asked questions. Pride still burned in her posture, but the fire had nothing left to feed on. I heard their stories one by one, trickling into my days like a leaky faucet I couldn't shut off. Instead of the triumph I thought I'd feel, what settled inside me was something murkier. Unease, even sorrow. I found myself most nights at Rosa's old community center. The air there smelled of chalk dust and faint coffee grounds that clung to the carpet no matter how many times it was vacuumed. Kids still came in after school, laughter spilling down the halls, their shoes squeaking against linoleum floors as they raced to computers that hummed and blinked. In the office I sat with my mug cupped in my hands. The steam rose slow and steady, curling toward the ceiling. My thumb traced the familiar crack in the ceramic, grounding me the way it always had. The light above buzzed faintly, casting soft yellow against the desk where Rosa's handwriting still lingered on sticky notes taped to the edge of the monitor. That's where I thought about Carlos. Not his slick tone, not the venom he spat in that loft, but the crack in his voice after he signed the no contest clause. Just for a breath, his mask had slipped and the sound of it still haunted me. A broken guitar string. Did I pity him? Did I still hate him? Rosa once told me that family is who lifts you, not who clips your wings. Carlos had tried to cut me down, yet when I closed my eyes, I saw not victory over him but the ruins he now stood in. One evening Harper stopped by. Her entrance was as steady as always, heels clicking, silver hair catching the light, her folder tucked neatly under her arm. She set it on the table, her voice crisp, matter-of-fact. Audit shows thousands missing, she said. Elena siphoned money for years. Rosa suspected, but she couldn't stop her in time. That's why she built in safeguards, blockchain records, video evidence. She wanted you protected. Her words anchored me. Heavy, yes, but steadying. Rosa hadn't just left me a legacy, she had left me her foresight, her shield, her trust. She knew betrayal was coming and she had written me into her defenses. I stared into the mug, the crack pressing against my thumb. Every scar tells a story. Every break that doesn't shatter is proof you can survive. Elena's empire gone. Diego's startup in flames. Sophia stripped of her pride. Carlos silent in my memory. They tried to erase me, to twist Rosa's love into a weapon against me. They failed. But I kept asking myself, if I carry their ruin in my chest, do I let them win again? Do I let their downfall become part of me? Outside the window I heard the kids laughing again. Their voices rose over the hum of computers, bright and raw. I saw myself in them, small and scared once, clutching scraps of belonging. Rosa had seen me, called me her star, given me more than survival, she gave me light. The mug warmed my palms and my chest ached with something bittersweet. Justice had landed. Their empires were dust. But forgiveness, that was a different battle. Could I forgive without forgetting? Could I move forward without dragging their shadows with me? I didn't know yet. But I knew this much. Their downfall wasn't mine to carry. Rosa's legacy wasn't about their ruin. It was about the kids out there chasing light on borrowed laptops, dreaming big in small rooms. And maybe that was enough. The warehouse on the east side of Austin had always been a place of shadows. Oil stains on cracked concrete, rusted beams creaking under the Texas sun, air heavy with the memory of engines and dust. Now as I stepped inside, the air was alive with something new. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the faint metallic tang of wires heating under the glow of power strips. Screens flickered on in rows, humming like a choir warming up. The space buzzed with sound. The tap-tap-tap of keyboards, the squeak of rolling chairs, the excited chatter of kids who weren't used to belonging anywhere. Rosa's digital equity hub. I stood in the middle of it all, holding my chipped mug like it was a compass. My chest ached with a strange weight, half pride, half fear. On opening day, 100 teens had filled the hub, slipping through the doors in groups of 2s and 3s. Some came with shoes falling apart at the seams, backpacks patched with duct tape, clothes that carried the scent of laundromats and long bus rides. Their eyes darted everywhere, some wide with wonder at the glowing monitors, others narrowed, bracing for the inevitable rejection. I knew that looked too well. I had lived inside it. The crack in the mug pressed into my thumb as I walked between them, grounding me. It had carried me through every storm, soaked up every tremor of doubt. And now it felt heavier, as though Rosa herself had poured her faith into it, waiting for me to pass it on. Toward the back, a girl sat alone. Her hair fell like a curtain across her face as she hunched over the keyboard, pressing random keys, then pulling her hands back quickly as if afraid she might break something. Her posture was tight, defensive, like she was trying to disappear into her chair. I recognized the quiet hope under all that fear. It was the same thread I had once clung to when Rosa first placed a laptop in front of me. I knelt beside her, the mug warm in my hand. Without overthinking, I slid it onto the desk in front of her. "This mug's yours now," I said softly, careful not to scare her off. "Keep coding." Her fingers froze above the keys. Slowly she turned to look at me. Her eyes lifted, hesitant, then softened. A smile tugged at her lips. Small but real, the kind of smile that wasn't about politeness but about being seen. It was the same smile I remembered giving Rosa when she called me her star. For a moment it felt like time bent, and Rosa was there again, nodding at both of us from some corner of the room. Steam curled from the mug, mingling with the faint ozone of the machines, a thread of warmth weaving into the whir of fans and clicking keys. The hub swelled with life. Kids leaned over each other's screens, pointing at lines of code, laughing when a bug crashed their program, cheering when it finally ran. The sound was chaotic, imperfect, but it was beautiful. Every keystroke was a heartbeat. Every burst of laughter was oxygen. The hum of possibility filled the space, drowning out every whisper of doubt that had haunted me. On the front wall we had hung Rosa's photo, her sharp eyes locked forward, her expression fierce and unwavering. Beneath it, in bold letters etched onto steel, "Code your own future." The words gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a promise carved into the very bones of the place. Harper had been with me through every step, her presence steady, her voice always one step ahead of fear. She had made the calls I couldn't, pulled favors from people I didn't know existed. When the $300,000 grant came through, from one of Rosa's old VC allies who still believed in her brilliance, I realized Rosa's reach hadn't ended with her death. Her network lived on, strong as ever, waiting for me to step into it. The grant had transformed this warehouse. We filled it with refurbished laptops that hummed like second chances, Wi-Fi strong enough to hold every login without crashing, mentors who understood that coding wasn't just about logic but about believing you could build something in a world that told you not to try. Rosa had taught me that compassion was as critical as syntax, and I was determined to teach it the same way she had. As I walked the aisles, listening to the symphony of voices and keystrokes, Rosa's words echoed in my mind. Family is who lifts you, not who clips your wings. The truth of it had been carved into my bones through betrayal and survival, and now, watching these kids lean toward each other instead of pulling away, I felt it breathe again. Still, the scars lingered. They pressed against me in quiet moments, in the way my thumbs still searched for the crack in that mug even though it no longer belonged to me. In the way Carlos's voice sometimes haunted my memory, the sharp edge of his betrayal slicing into the silence. But hope was rising here, louder and stronger, refusing to be drowned. It spread across the warehouse like sunlight breaking through high windows, slow but unstoppable. As the day drew to a close, monitors glowed blue against the dusky light slipping in from the street outside. The hum of fans softened, but the kids still lingered, reluctant to leave as though afraid the doors might shut forever if they stepped outside. I stood by Rosa's photo, my chest swelling with a heaviness that felt almost like peace. I had carried rage, dread, and the weight of survival for so long that I hardly recognized this feeling. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was a start. Inside my head I whispered, steady and certain, Rosa's love lives in every kid I teach. But as I let my hand fall from the frame of her photo, another thought crept in, softer, sharper. Will this heal me? The question hung there unanswered as the last rays of sunlight stretched across the floor. A year can stretch and shrink at the same time. Some days it feels like the ink on those no contest clauses is still drying. Other days it feels like the war for Rosa's legacy happened in another lifetime. Tonight I sit in my apartment, the kind of quiet wrapping around me that isn't lonely but earned. The hum of my old fridge beats steady in the background like a low drum. A half-open window lets in the faint scent of rain mixed with hot asphalt, the city outside alive with car horns and neon hums. Austin glitters beyond the glass, headlights crawling like fireflies caught in an endless loop. But in here the only light comes from the warm glow of my desk lamp. On the desk, tomorrow's lesson plans are stacked neatly, pages marked with highlighter and notes scribbled in the margins. Not frantic notes scrawled in defense, not desperate reminders of what to fight next. Just plans, structured, hopeful, focused on building instead of surviving. Beside them sits my chipped mug, tea steaming into delicate ribbons. My hand cups it without thinking, thumb running over the crack as naturally as breathing. That scar in the ceramic used to remind me of how close I'd come to breaking. Now it feels like proof of endurance, how something cracked can still hold warmth. The hub has become more than even Rosa dared to dream. 600 kids now walk through its doors every week. Kids with worn sneakers, patched backpacks, eyes clouded from too many rejections. In East Austin's old warehouse they found something different. Belonging. Possibility. A family that isn't tied by blood but by choice. The air there smells of fresh paint, faint solder from rewired machines, and the ozone of computers sparking to life. The glow of monitors throws blues and greens against murals the teens painted themselves. Snippets of code stretched across walls in bold, defiant strokes. Print, if build. Every keystroke is a heartbeat. Every cheer when code runs, every groan when it fails, becomes a chorus I never get tired of. I walk the aisles every day telling them what Rosa once told me. Perfection isn't the goal. Persistence is. And when I see them lean in, help each other debug, laugh over syntax errors, I know this is Rosa's true legacy. A family that lifts, never erases. At the entrance her photo hangs large, impossible to miss. Rosa, smiling mid-laugh, eyes lit like she was always daring the world to keep up. Beneath her, etched in steel, are the words she left us with. Code your own future. I've seen kids pause under it, whisper the phrase before walking in like a prayer to themselves. Rosa is still teaching, still guiding even now. My phone buzzes, breaking the stillness of my apartment. It rattles against the wood of my desk, nudging the neat stacks of paper. I glance at the screen and my breath stumbles. Carlos. For a long moment I just stare. His voice has haunted me all year, slick with charm, sharp with betrayal. But I also remember the crack in it that night in the loft, the note that slipped out when he realized he'd lost. Against every instinct I swiped to answer. Mia. His voice is softer now, stripped bare, like someone sanded down every edge. I'm sorry. The pause stretches so long I almost think the call dropped. We followed Mom's lead. We thought blood meant power. We were wrong. The silence presses heavy in the space between us. My throat tightens. For a moment I feel that old pull, the urge to comfort him, to carry the weight he's finally admitting. But Rosa's voice echoes inside me, steady and sure. Family doesn't clip your wings. I take a breath, thumb pressing harder into the mug's crack. Family doesn't erase you, Carlos. I forgive you, but I don't forget. On the other end there's a hitch in his breathing, unguarded, raw, before static swallows the line and the call cuts. I stare at the dead screen, chest aching but not breaking. Forgiveness feels like a bridge, but boundaries are the walls that keep me standing. I set the phone down gently and look back at Rosa's photo hanging on my wall. My fingers trace the frame, glass cool under my touch. My whisper trembles, but it finds its way out. Thanks for believing. And in that quiet I hear it. Not out loud but inside, where her voice has lived ever since she first looked at me and called me her star. You were always my star. Tears prick at my eyes, but I don't look away. Rosa didn't just leave me a grant. He gave me myself. She gave me the courage to fight, the will to claim a future that everyone else tried to deny me. Tomorrow the hub will glow again. Screens alive, kids laughing, 600 dreams stitching themselves into something real. And I'll be there, not as a charity case, not as someone erased, but as someone who belongs. Rosa's heir. Chosen not by blood but by love. I glance at the mug cooling on my desk, the crack catching the lamplight. Scars don't vanish. They're not supposed to. They stay, reminding us that we endured, that we're still here, carrying warmth despite everything. And so I'll leave you with this. What would you do if family tried to erase you? Would you fight for your worth? If my story struck something in you, share yours below. Comment. Tell me when you stood your ground. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because your stories, they keep me going. Stay strong, y'all.